Thanks everybody for coming on this beautiful day to our local champions session. This is part 2 of our little series on solar, following up on Audrey Friedrichson's talk about solar siting with her work at Scenic Hudson. And today we have 2 very special guests who are some heavy hitters in Hudson Valley, in politics, climate work. And we're just, I'm so grateful for you both taking the time to chat with us. So today what we're gonna do is have Jen do a presentation, and then Robert, I'll introduce Jen, and then we'll do our usual where we do our 2 breakout rooms, so you can spend some time in conversation with each of these fine folks, and then we'll switch. We're going to break a little bit early so that the cohort has some time to come together and just touch base about all of the other projects we have going on. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce Dr. Jen Metzger, PhD in political science and climate change, studying ozone work done, which was really groundbreaking work. Jen, you might also know from her time in the state Senate, where she was really instrumental in getting the nation-leading legislation passed, the CLCPA. She's also a co-founder of Citizens for Local Power, and now continues to consult for that group, and advocates for renewable energy and community and a stronger community, and that's a really interesting organization. We had Jessica Clegg actually come and speak earlier in our program about the Green Jobs Initiative, if you remember that. And so Jen today is going to be talking to us, giving us kind of the lay of the land in terms of policy, specifically with solar, and then she's also going to talk about this new, sorry, garbage trucks coming through my neighborhood.
Sorry.
Yeah, so she's going to be talking about solar, specifically community choice aggregation and the latest there, and also community distributed solar. And she's also going to talk about the new stretch legislation, or I guess it's a policy that your towns could adopt for your building codes to try to get new construction and renovations up to speed. So we're really, really, really excited to have Jen here today. And she knows this stuff inside and out. So it'll be exciting for you to be able to pick her brain in the breakout rooms as well. So go ahead, Jen, take it away.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully. Let's see, did I do this before? Great. So first of all, I want to just give a shout out to all of you and you're doing this work in your communities, because it's the most important work. And I was in the state Senate for 1 term, but I was in local government for over 10 years, and my heart is in local government. And I really believe that's where the rubber hits the road on climate. And I'm going to talk today. I was asked to talk about community choice aggregation, and I can talk about community renewables within that context. And also the stretch energy code, which is something I'll get to in a little while, but I just think is just absolutely a really important thing for our communities to do at the local level. But to start out with community choice aggregation, I started working on this some years ago for Citizens for Local Power. We were actually trying to bring community choice aggregation to New York. That's how long ago it was, and it was finally enabled in 2016. But just to give you kind of the quick like CCA in a nutshell. I'm not sure how much you all know about it, but it's a horrible name. I wish it was a better name. Community choice aggregation. It's not very at all very exciting sounding, but be that as it may, we're stuck with it. But it's a tool that enables municipalities or groups of municipalities to pool or aggregate the buying power of their residents and businesses to secure alternative energy supply for their communities, and also to develop energy programs tailored to their community needs and goals. It's a way to think about it is, the utility is the default supplier of electricity. You can choose as a customer to choose, another energy supply company. The utility though is the default. In a CCA, when you establish a CCA program, the municipality becomes the default supplier of electricity. And your residents can choose other suppliers if they want. They could choose to go back to the utility, but you become the default supplier. But it's just energy supply, not delivery, not distribution, not transmission. The utility remains responsible for the poles and wires and for billing. Now, there's obviously cost to administering a program like this. Not a lot of costs, but there are costs. And I just want to note that it's just as the utility recovers those costs through the rates, so does your CCA program. It's kind of built into the rates. The merchant function charge on your utility bill from your utility, that's their charge for supply. And you no longer charge that. Instead, your customers will get, it's just full, the costs are folded in to your rate. There are different versions of CCA. When it was first created, it was actually in response to deregulation of energy supply. If you remember in the olden days, the utilities used to own both generation and transmission and distribution. They were made to sell off their generation assets. The idea was that it would, be good for consumers because there would be competition to supply energy to customers, and that competition would lower energy prices. This was the idea. It didn't actually really happen because individual customers are very small customers, and these retail energy supply companies don't have a lot of interest in competing for your business. They'd rather go after the large customers. So CCA was created as a way to pool the buying power and leverage that buying power to get a better deal on energy supply for your community. But over time, the program evolved, and many communities really used it primarily as a lever to green the energy supply by procuring 100% renewable energy through a same kind of process through a bulk supply contract. And then that's kind of the 1.5 model of CCA. And then the 2.0 model of CCA really focuses more on local renewable investments and local energy programs. It could be energy efficiency. It could be public education and outreach programs. It could be, it really kind of the sky's the limit in terms of the creativity of the local program. But most programs are like the 1.5 model, 1.0 model, but as we'll see, more and more are moving into community renewable power. The first CCA was launched in Massachusetts in 1997. It's actually a really interesting program there. They focus on helping their communities be more energy efficient. The entire Cape Cod is a CCA. It's now 8 states have enabled CCA. New York enabled it in 2016. 130 municipalities passed local laws, and over 60 municipalities are now receiving supply through a CCA. The Public Service Commission, when it enabled CCA in New York, it created the design standards and principles for CCA programs, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of the basics of those. One of the key provisions is like the who can establish a CCA. CCAs in New York can be municipal or intermunicipal. Villages and cities and towns. It has to be established by local law. Counties cannot authorize CCA, but they can administer or support a CCA authorized by local governments. There is oversight of CCA programs by the New York State Public Service Commission. So when a program is created, you have to have an implementation plan, including a public outreach plan. That's extremely important. A data protection plan. The utility is providing data to your CCA, customer data that you need to acquire supply and communicate with your customers. So they need to make sure you have a plan to secure that data. And they need to see copies of the local law. Who is enrolled in a community choice aggregation program, and how are they enrolled? In New York, it's so a kind of defining feature of a CCA program is it's opt-out. As I said, like you become the default supplier. So in New York, it's residential and small commercial customers are automatically enrolled in the CCA program. And if they do not want to participate, they have to opt out. And there's a notification process for that. Large commercial, industrial, and municipal customers can opt into the program if they'd like. And any customer, any residents of yours that are already enrolled in another energy supply company, they can choose to opt in if they like. It's really important that your community is informed and understands the process, what's happening with your CCA program. They have to start receiving information in advance, a couple of months in advance of enrollment. They have to receive, this is a requirement, a letter from the municipality setting a 30-day opt-out period for those that don't want to participate in the CCA. Customers are permitted to cancel their CCA service without penalty before the end of the 3rd billing cycle, but in your CCA, you could require that there's never a penalty. It's up to your community. And there is an opportunity every time you enter into a contract for a CCA, in a CCA for supply, you have to give your community members the opportunity to opt out and not participate. Okay, so once an implementation and data, once you got all of your plans approved by the Public Service Commission, then this process begins. I'm going to just go through this pretty quickly, but you request the data from the utility. You put out an RFP to solicit bids for supply. And once that's been chosen, you'll get individual customer data from the utility. You send an opt-out letter to your residents and small businesses. And then that's basically the process. It's all of the utility does all of the billing. This is not something that you have to worry about. They do all of the billing for the CCA and the ESCO. And there is a requirement for annual reports to the Public Service Commission. So you're like, oh, I don't want to do all of this work. But you don't have to administer the CCA if you, in fact, I don't think that there are any municipalities that actually do the administration themselves, although they could legally. There are no rules about who administers your CCA, but there is a common model in New York. Many use a consultant, third-party administrator. There are 3 companies that in New York that are active in New York: Jewel Assets, Mega, and Good Energy. But as I said, it's not the only way to do it. There is an intermunicipal organization in New York, Sustainable Westchester, that administers its own CCA program as part of a whole suite of community energy programs. It's a really interesting model, and one that I would love to see replicated in New York State, because it takes a much broader approach. It's locally based, and if you guys want to talk about that later, we can. That's the model in Massachusetts that Cape Light uses, and they have these very extensive energy efficiency programs for their communities, which are really cool. They've done some really great work. In California, CCAs are administered by public authorities. A county government could be an administrator. We don't have a model. There's no model of that, but that is permitted in New York State. So the energy supply contract, just, some of the basics. The existing programs in New York offer a brown or a green option, a 100% renewable option. In New York State, a kind of a very good provision of New York State's CCA laws that it requires that they be in-state renewables, that it supports in-state renewables, which is important to reaching our climate goals. There's no law against you setting even more specific parameters in your, in your RFPs, saying you want, energy, certain types of energy resources, or you want it from a certain region, what have you. I mean, it's kind of, but generally speaking, what's out there right now, it's basically New York State sourced renewables. Today, in New York State, 33 municipalities have adopted the green 100% renewable option as their default option for their communities, which is great. The majority of them have. 23 have adopted just the standard mix that the utility would get: nuclear, gas, a little bit of renewables, hydro. And another kind of defining feature of these contracts is that they are fixed rates for a fixed period of time. The utility rates are variable from month to month, but CCA contracts are fixed and therefore stable, which has its benefits. There are always risks to a stable contract too. Might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower than the utility, depending upon various factors and the time of year, but that stability can be very helpful to households and businesses. So increasingly, and I know Robert's going to talk about community renewable, a community solar project that they're doing in Red Hook. Community renewable energy, I'm not sure how much you all know about it, but there are different models of community renewable energy in New York. And generally speaking, the most common model is a subscription model. By subscribing to a local solar, community solar development, you're supporting renewable development in your on the local distribution system. Basically, that's the goal, right, of supporting local renewable development. The solar farm sells the power to the utility. The utility, in return, pays the developer in bill credits, and those credits are sold to individual customers at a discount, typically 10%. CCAs, for instance, like Jules program and also Sustainable Westchester, have integrated community renewables into their CCA on an opt-in basis, basically, encouraging their customers to enroll in community renewable programs. And you can do both at the same time. You can continue to get the supply contract, but also participate in community renewable energy. And it, as I said, it guarantees the going rate is a guaranteed 10% discount on your electricity bill. Currently they're opt-in, but it's now opt-out programs are becoming available through community choice, generally through community choice aggregation. And there are some benefits to including community renewable energy on an opt-out basis. First of all, it expands the benefits greatly to your community. It's like a guaranteed discount, and you're just widening access to the benefits of a community renewable project. Community solar farms, community renewable developments, the developers do credit checks and for their subscribers, and this limits who has access to the benefits of the project. When it's on an opt-out basis, there are no credit checks, and it also enables low-income community members to participate. HEAP members cannot participate in a CCA, in a supply contract. So you're widening access to the benefits of local renewable energy to your community when opt-out CCA becomes part of the program. I don't want to confuse things too much, but this is one model of community renewable energy. I just want to make sure you have that in your head. This subscriber model. There are other models, like communities actually owning the generation themselves. That's a different model. But I do, in national grid territory, there's already a pilot for opt-out community renewable energy. It's going statewide in our area, Central Hudson. We're just waiting for them to implement the billing changes they need to make so that this can be an option for local CCA programs, but that should happen in a matter of months. I just want to mention that, community choice aggregation, it's a relatively new development in New York State, 2016. It's not that old. It's its 5th year anniversary this year. There's a lot of potential. It is, I believe that we've hardly scratched the surface for CCA programs in New York. They've focused mainly on supply contracts, and increasingly on community renewable generation. But there are possibilities for providing energy efficiency services to your community through CCA, demand management services. The education and community engagement part of CCA, to me, is one of the most important things, making sure that your community are educated energy consumers and making energy choices that that are best for our communities. So it's really, I think a lot more could probably be put into this this kind of this side of CCA, and different administrators. Let's just say it's very variable across CCA programs. In Sustainable Westchester is it's a nonprofit that I think it's like 24, I can't remember the exact number of municipalities that are participating in it, but the CCA is just one program, and then they have other programs too, a renewable heat program, an EV program, all these programs, and they're integrated and kind of a full service, you know, energy program for their communities. And it's, as I mentioned earlier, a very interesting model. I think that CCA, again, it would have to, it's more, this is more suited to an intermunicipal model, but could be an important vehicle for energy planning in our communities and across communities, and siting and basically identifying the best opportunities for investments, renewable energy efficiency, what have you. And eventually, you know, potentially community ownership of energy. This is, the state rules would have to change to enable this. As I mentioned, in California, they do own their CCAs, do invest directly in renewable resources and sell power to their members. But this is a direction that CCA could eventually evolve into and be a real power for local control. So let's see, you guys have to tell me, I'm probably already well beyond my 20 minutes, but I will say that there are a lot of resources on CCA. On the NYSERDA has a whole toolkit that they put together, model law, model contracts and solicitations. It's good to take a look at this, even if you're going with a CCA administrator, just to familiarize yourself with it. There are also resources available on my organization's website, Citizens for Local Power. You might also want to check out Sustainable Westchester's website. And of course, the Department of Public Service Commission on their, this is the case number for community choice aggregation, but every document for every CCA program that's ever been filed appears on the Public Service Commission website. So if you want to see what communities have been doing since it was first enabled in New York, and you have some time on your hands, you might want to check that out. And you guys can tell me if we're over time. I'll just make a quick pitch for stretch rather than going for, you know, going through the slides. But you tell me.
Yeah, that sounds good, Jen. Quick.
Okay. Just really quickly, I've been doing a lot of outreach on New York Stretch. You know, we have very aggressive climate goals in New York State. But I'd say the biggest nut to crack is really our building sector. It's very difficult. 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from our buildings. 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2050, when we're supposed to be net zero greenhouse gas emissions, are already built. So that means like costly retrofits of these buildings and getting off of oil and gas, et cetera. It's going to be a really big challenge. And really the low hanging fruit is new construction. It's much more cost effective to strengthen you know, the energy efficiency requirements for new buildings. It's just And it's also just going to improve the quality of life of the people that live and work in those buildings, because it's just better air quality. The temperatures are more comfortable. Their energy costs for the long term will be reduced because the buildings are more energy efficient. The stretch code was developed by NYSERDA. It applies to both residential and commercial buildings. On average, it achieves like 11% higher and greater energy efficiency than the standard 2020 energy code. For residents, it's like closer to 20% more energy efficient. It's a cost-effective tool. It really does not add that much to the initial, cost of a building, but the paybacks are excellent. You consider, especially when you have a building around for 50 to 100 years. I mean, on residents, it's like a 4.5-year, 5-year payback. Basically all the tools to pass it, there's model ordinance and a whole model kit at NYSERDA. They've made it as easy as possible for municipalities to pass. So I really couldn't recommend more strongly that communities consider passing the stretch code. And it's like, I'm just gonna skip down to, I'm not gonna get into it but with you now because we're out of time, but there's a NYSERDA has a toolkit on the stretch code that includes a comparison document so you can see what's different between the energy code and the stretch code. They've also done independent economic analyses on the code. And in terms of incentives, you get a $5,000 incentive just for passing it, $50,000 if your community is over 40,000 people. And both CCA and stretch give you a lot of points toward clean energy community grants. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sure you're all like, but I'm happy to entertain any questions when we get to the breakout sessions.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was a fantastic, accessible breakdown of all this super complicated information, and so good to know about the stretch code. Thank you. Wonderful. So I am going to introduce Robert McKeon. We're so happy to have you, Robert. Thank you so much for being here. Robert is the town supervisor of Red Hook, New York. And as supervisor, Robert has proved his leadership in the Hudson Valley sustainability realm. Red Hook was one of the first towns to become a clean energy community and a bronze certified climate smart community. Red Hook has also led with its groundbreaking community solar array, providing solar energy for 270 homes and all municipal buildings. Red Hook has also done community choice aggregation in cooperation with 6 other Hudson Valley municipalities and is looking towards microgrids in the future. Robert and his wife, who's a doctor, and their children relocated to Red Hook from Brooklyn in 1998. They live on a 500-acre farm where they raise grass-fed beef, goats, llamas, and horses. Robert entered the municipal scene with an innovative action in 2003 when he spearheaded a public referendum to create a real estate transfer fee to be able to fund the purchase of farms' development rights. 83% of voters approved it. And in 2007, he was named Hudson Valley Hero by Scenic Hudson for his work. Over 35 properties and 4,000 acres of preserved farmland join other open space easements in the township, a topic that we covered on May 20th. So now Robert is going to talk about what his town did with its municipal community solar project and now with the CCA. So Robert, take it away, and I will share your slides right now, and you just tell me when you want me to switch them.
Sure. Thanks very much, Paige. Welcome. It's nice to be with colleagues on the local level. One of the great things about being in local government is who you get to hang out with and shared interests. Obviously, renewable and clean energy is something that we're very much interested in on the local level. I've always thought that, if we rely on the federal government to solve our problems for us in this area, we're going to be in big trouble. Maybe we have it completely backwards. We need to look at ourselves as the polluters and what can we do to turn things around, because it's going to take every effort by everyone to try to make it happen. And so I have some slides just for context to talk about what we've done in Red Hook, but it's mostly just to give you context over the period of time. Paige spoke about the last, maybe 2 decades, what we've been doing in the town of Red Hook. Next slide, Paige, if you could. Great. So yes, a purchase of development rights program. Actually, just a minor correction to what Paige said. So we did a public referendum to authorize bonding in 2003. The Community Preservation Fund in 2007 was the real estate transfer fee, but the approval by the public was in both instances. One came out of our tax monies, and the other one was real estate transfer fees. Land use, obviously land use is a critical component of reducing emissions. And so to the extent that we can concentrate our development in the right places near transportation, the better that has as far as an impact. Had a temporary conservation easement program also approved in 2005. And that helps with landowners who aren't yet ready to make a permanent decision on what they want to do with their properties. In 2011, we passed what we think was an important zoning legislation called Centers and Green Space. And the idea being that we've identified where we'd like to protect, where we have already protected, but done sort of the most difficult aspect of the job, which is to say, where do you want to develop and how do you want to develop? And so we created a traditional neighborhood district, and we have a dense development. Developers can buy additional density that goes into a separate zoning incentive fund to purchase more open space lands and recreational lands. Next slide, Paige, if we could, please. Or scroll. This is our zoning map I think I spoke of. We have 2 villages in our township, the sleepy village of Tivoli and the central village of Red Hook. And we also have wonderful Bard College over there on the left-hand side of your screen. But if you look at the reds and the purples down below the village of Red Hook, that's where we identified we'd like to have concentrated development next to the village of Red Hook, right along Route 9. Okay, next slide, Paige, if we could. Here we go with the renewable and energy conservation. In 2008, we had a photovoltaic demonstration project done here at Town Hall. In 2009 was when I first started in local government on the town board. And one of the things that I wanted to do was create an energy committee, something unique, or at least unique in most communities. And we got to work. There was stimulus money back then, 2009, and we applied for quite a few dollars for 2 PV projects, one for Town Hall here, in addition to the demonstration project, and then one for our firehouse. And we were successful in 2 grant applications. And in the case of the firehouse, it supplies all of the needs. In the case of Town Hall, it's over 2/3 of the needs of Town Hall. I have wonderful volunteers here in Red Hook, one of which heads our CAC and is the sustainability coordinator for Bard College. And she spearheaded with the CAC and others a 10% challenge, an educational campaign to reduce emissions in our community, letting folks know what they can do to accomplish that. The town passed a climate action plan now 9 years ago. Some of the other initiatives is organizing with neighboring townships for a Solarize campaign. So in essence, doing a lot of the legwork for individuals who want to have PV on top of their houses or businesses. And so what the Solarize program is really narrowing down for homeowners a couple of trusted vendors that they can work with guaranteed savings for installation and sort of a lot of hand holding, save a lot of work. We did a similar campaign for weatherization Energize Red Hook, and that was in the following year or two, 17 and 18. Page for the next slide, please. Here's a town hall. The parking lot has since been redone. It looks like some sort of backyard area there, but there's our town hall PV. Next slide, if we could, Paige. Paige mentioned that we were the 4th township, I believe, in New York State to be considered a clean energy community. What came with that, besides kudos, is $100,000. And so we've used it on several projects here. Retrofitting town hall, blown insulation, closed cell. We've retrofitted all our HVAC equipment. We've done 8 EV charging stations here at Town Hall, dating back to the end of 2017. And I'll be talking a little bit more about community solar and community choice aggregation here. What we're currently working on, or finishing up actually, our LED conversion, streetlight conversion is essentially complete. We're just waiting for a couple of add-on lights that'll be energized. We have some electric vans that are being built for us for folks with physical challenges and seniors to help them get around our community. So what do we have next, Page? What have we got? Oh, there are some goofy looking guys out in a field. This is the well field in the that is owned by the village of Red Hook, slightly outside of the village, in fact, adjoining the village in the township. And what we did was partner with our 2 villages to build a community solar project, something that I had campaigned on in 2015, because there was a lot of interest in having solar in our community, but not everybody was set up for it. Either they needed roof work done in the near term, or they had way too many trees, which obviously we wouldn't want cut down for this purpose on an individual basis. So there was great demand for it. And so this is something that I had the opportunity to speak to voters, constituents about, and there was tremendous interest in it. So we partnered with our 2 villages. We went out and did an RFP for a 2 megawatt system, something that was called out in our climate action plan 4 years earlier. And so we went out to bid, but we structured it a little bit differently. Jen spoke about ownership. And so in our model, because municipalities can't take advantage of tax incentives, the way we've structured our project here is that it's privately owned by solar developers only until those tax incentives are exhausted. And then on year 7, we have the option, not the obligation, but the option to purchase the system and own the system ourselves, which in all likelihood, we will take advantage of that option because we would like to be in control of that system and create a microgrid here in the village and town. And so we went out to bid 2015. Sun Common, who is a local installer here in Rhinebeck, won the bid, and we started getting to work. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, tariffs came into play. So the first thing that the Trump administration levied tariffs on was solar panels from China. So we had to go back and sharpen our pencils and see how we could make it all work. And fortunately, NYSERDA and New York State came to the rescue, and they beefed up their support for community solar, because they recognized in order to transition to renewable energy, these one-offs that we're doing are making a little difference, but not enough. It's not rapid enough. And so we need to get community solar and community choice aggregation and get it in gear in as many communities as possible so that we can provide the demand to build more and more renewable energy projects. So NYSERDA came up to bat, and we completed the utilities CSAR, which is a study of how much it would cost to interconnect our project with the grid. It's one of the challenges is to find a good spot near three-phase wire, and how much does it cost to do that affects the proving out of the model. And so we were fortunate. We were very close to this property. It's very close to Route 9, where there were actually a couple of lines that we could have tapped into. It worked very well for the utility. And we applied for a grant for that study. The study was conducted, and lo and behold, we launched this project. And they started building and they started marketing for us this project, and it sold out rather quickly. There was tremendous interest in joining this subscription model. Very easy, you just sign up. There was no cancellation fee. In fact, if you signed up early, you got a bit of a promo, 2 free months. So it was sold out within a matter of months. They held a couple of community events to educate folks, and they structured it in such a way that our residents had first crack at it, both in the village and the towns. And so there's roughly 250 residential customers right now in it. This also supplies the equivalent of the energy for the municipal buildings in the town and the 2 villages that don't already have solar on them. So it doesn't apply to our town hall, for instance, but the village halls, both of which have historic buildings, are able to be serviced by this type of a program without doing anything to the integrity of the historic nature of those properties. The project went live December 31st, I kid you not, at 11 o'clock in 2019. There were some deadlines they wanted to meet in order to meet certain tax advantages. And it's been very successful ever since. It's been a source of community pride, as a matter of fact. They've done some work to try to screen the project as well. If you look in the background there, you'll see some nice fencing. There's plantings on the other side as well. And there's a goofy guy with a shovel. Next page, if you would please. And here they are working through the winter. It was a nice light winter. It was really a marvel to see this be put up. You know, with local government, it's all about efficiency, and certainly with generating renewable energy, community solar is certainly a way to go. It's very efficient land use. You can pick your spots where you think it's appropriate, where it makes financial sense, where it can be connected into the grid. Next slide page. There's our Tivoli mayor. You can see the enthusiasm. We had a nice grand opening event. This is a small faction of the crowd that's off to the left there, but a very proud moment here. You see, we have the well fields is where they were built on. You often hear about solar projects on brownfields, but if you have a well field, there's not a lot that you can use it for, because you want to protect your, your drinking water. So this actually had a secondary benefit, which is all that fencing that was created kept, the property protected from anything that could pose a problem to the wells themselves. Next page. Here's a pretty shot. Always have to have at least one beauty shot for a presentation. And there you see how many panels. I forget the exact number now. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 panels that are there. Next page. So these are links about the two different programs, 3 different programs, as a matter of fact, that I like to highlight. We talked about CDG, that's the Community Solar. You can link on to get more information. Community choice aggregation. So we joined with other municipalities. There are now 14 municipalities that be going in for round 2 of CCA with Joule assets. They went out to bid. We chose as a municipality to only offer the 100% renewable. We thought it's not in the public's interest for us to be trying to promote something less than renewable and local renewable energy, quite frankly. So in the last phase, and we were in for 18 months, we joined slightly later than the other municipalities. We had something in the neighborhood of 1,700 houses, which it applied to. We had something in the neighborhood of just under 1,500 that remained in the program, a really terrific ratio. You can imagine we had, prior to our community solar, we had about 250 households with individual solar. And then we go and build a community solar farm. We have 250 households thereabouts, give or take, that are joining the CDG project. And then we do CCA with the supply that's all New York State Hydro for phase 1. And we have almost 1,500 households doing that. And so really what's happened is we've changed the dynamic completely, where we're having the overwhelming majority of our residential housing has converted over to having clean energy supplying their homes. So it's been a really terrific and sudden transformation. And so I can't recommend it highly enough. Now for us, the timing, sure, it could have been a little bit better because we joined, there was a fixed rate, which is really wonderful for your constituents. Of course, the pandemic comes, the energy rates just plummet. I mean, first time in history, oil futures were negative. They were, in theory, giving away oil pricing for the future. That obviously has changed quite dramatically. In fact, in March, the rate that Central Hudson was charging was 55% higher than the rate that's in the contract with the CCA energy provider. So, you know, recommend both programs highly. Happy to help with any of the municipalities getting on board. I think that you'll find your constituents feel very strongly about climate issues and want to participate. And the fact that you're doing the heavy lifting for them is really very exciting. And I will tell you, in 20 years of volunteering, I've had a lot of response to a lot of things. The only time I've had a crowd ever stand up and clap for me is when we talked about community solar. So it's an important issue to the folks out there. I want to talk about one thing that's near and dear to our heart is transportation and transformation over to electric vehicles. And so Jen spoke about the impacts and reducing emissions. We have on our energy committee a physics professor who does some work for us. And we found in our community that if folks could transfer to an electric vehicle on average, of course, nobody's an average, they can reduce their emissions by 32% because of where we live and what our usage is. And so we're focused on trying to, and we will have a local campaign this year to educate our constituents about the benefits of electric vehicles. And that is our next slide page. What's next is really transforming. And we have just applied for two, or in the process of having two fast chargers here, one in the village and one in the town, now that there's some funding appropriated again for that purpose. So I think I will conclude on that. I'm sorry if I spoke so quickly, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you both so much, and definitely inspiring to hear firsthand from the horse's mouth what's happening for a town in terms of transitioning. It's really, really, really cool. Well, thank you, everyone. It was great. Wonderful material, and it sounds like some of our cohort here, they're already pushing some of these projects forward in their town. So we'll have to report back and let you know.
Yeah, well, it's great to meet all of you, and thanks so much for having us. And Robert, you're, as usual, doing amazing work in Red Hook. Thanks for being the leader you are.
Well, that's nice for you to say that, but I was a follower when I came to CCA years ago, went to Marbletown to hear Jen Metzger talk about CCA with one of my energy committee members, and we walked away going, oh, that's way too much work. We can't possibly do all of that. And in a way, we were right. But you have these consultants now that do all the work for you as the municipality. And then your work is to ensure that the public gets educated on it. And it's so meaningful. And Jen's been a real champion of getting Albany to enable a lot of these programs that really make a difference and lead to a speedy transformation.
So I just want to say one quick thing about CCA. When something you said, Robert, triggered it in me, but you have to pass a local law enabling it. If your community goes this way, just make sure you're thinking about what your local goals and values are, and because you can incorporate that into the local law, and that's been the law of the land. If you want it to be 100% renewable, if that's your goal, is to be renewable, include that. If you want there to be a opt-out community renewable option, you should specify that in your local law. So just pay it, pay it. There's model kind of boilerplate laws out there, but you can modify it, tailor it to what you want as a community.
Yeah, I wouldn't get daunted by the workload involved with these programs. It's actually not that much now because of folks like Jen, and certainly the consultants that do the aggregation and do the bidding for you and all of that. All you need to do is participate and put a little bit of sweat equity into it.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thanks all. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Feel free to reach out if you need anything.
Yes. Same here. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.